What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir Technologies, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of tomorrow's trading day, Tuesday, February 6th. Well, Palantir stock here today up about 17.5%, something like that here in the after hours, reporting a really good earnings. Now, the actual earnings, the EPS, we met at an 8-cent adjusted result versus 8 cents expected, okay? And the revenue, $608.4 million compared to $602.4 million expectation. There's a couple of things that the focus is really on here. Listen, revenue in the fourth quarter went up 20% year over year to $608.4 million, as stated prior, and $508.6 million, that was a year earlier. So up 20% year over year. And in the shareholder letter, CEO Alex Karp, of course, saying that expansion and growth, quote, have never been greater, especially as demand for large language models in the US, quote, continues to be unrelenting. Listen, the stock's loving it. It's up nearly 20%, 17.5% here in the after hours. Let's take a look. You can see, first of all, we've ripped through that 18.25 level that we were talking about quite a bit, actually, in the weekend prep video for today, Monday. Now, here on the 1-minute chart, I mean, the story really is the after hours. Listen, typically what I say is after hours movement, we must take with a grain of salt. Why do I always say that? Because volume is typically incredibly low. Okay, however, it's worth pointing out here tonight, take a look at the volume in the after hours on this pump higher. This is abnormally high, even for an earnings release. Look at that compared to the actual regular trading hour candles right off the open. I mean, to have more volume across a variety of candles than averaging together the opening bell volume, I mean, listen, that is absurd, okay? But I mean, hey, you still have to take after hours movement with a grain of salt, even if the volume is absurd. Let me just zoom in on one thing. I just want to show you something as far as intraday movement is concerned early here off the open. We saw this downside move off the open. Now, some might argue that this was a scalp setup. Listen, for me, it's too sloppy. The channel was too tight. The tests were too, for lack of a better term, they were mushy, right? I think that's the best way to describe that. So, listen, as far as clean intraday scalp setups on Palantir, which is kind of unrelated to the actual company, more so just the stock movement, nothing for me here. If you want to get scalp setup alerts, my personal alerts, the link is in the pinned comment. You can also find swing trade setup alerts, unusual options activity, and if you want more of a hands-on experience, platinum one-on-one, if there are any spots available. Now, let's take a look at the 5-minute chart. I just want to show you guys here a little bit of a different view of this volume, just for to kind of prove my point here. I mean, look at the absurdity here. A ridiculous amount of volume. That is not incredibly common, even on earnings day. I mean, we've had a lot of earnings as of late, and this is more dramatic than I've seen across really any of the releases as far as volume compared to the opening bell volume, right? Volume on the release. Just absurd. But let's move on and get a little bit more of better context here. Now, listen. This is the 30-minute chart, right? The 50 period and the 200 period moving averages, those self-fulfilling prophecy indicators. Here's the thing. When you have big, giant blowout moves like we just had on Palantir, going from under 17 bucks a share to testing $20 a share, not a small move, part of the problem becomes, and we're going to see this on a variety of time frames here tonight, part of the problem becomes any psychological safety nets get left behind, right? Because they're lagging. All these indicators lag. Okay, even here on the 30-minute, the 50 period, which is the fastest out of all the time frames and moving averages that we look at between the 30-minute, the 4-hour, and the 2-year, it's getting left behind. Now, I imagine if Palantir holds this move into tomorrow, this thing's going to get yanked upside, but it's going to take a little bit of time considering the size and the aggressive nature of that move. But listen, if you're a bull looking at the 30-minute, you want that 50 period getting yanked up as quickly as possible, ideally above 18.25, and getting as close to the stock price as possible, with the stock price holding on to around that $20 region, because ideally you want that psychological safety net, that potential safety net, as close to the stock as we can possibly be. Because even though they just got blown out of the water, listen, a lot of bears are looking at this gap here and they're salivating, okay? So to discourage bears, bulls want that upside move as quickly as possible. Let's now look at the 4-hour here. Again, you're going to see the same thing. The 200 period way down here, that 50 period way down here, barely curling to the upside. If you're a bull, you want these things getting ripped up as quickly as possible. But here on the 4-hour, it will take its time. Just understand that. And if you're a bear, you ideally want these things hanging out as far down as possible, as long as possible, to let the stock kind of float on thin air, so to speak. And, you know, if you're a bear, you're hoping that gives some people a reason to second guess things. All right. Now, not a lot to get out of this 4-hour. Let's move on to the daily. All right. Understand, this is only going to show the closing price. So in order to really understand this, understand the stock is currently between 1950 and 20. But listen here, there are 3 areas in particular I am paying extremely close attention to in the near future, especially tomorrow, here on Palantir. First up, that $20 a share level, that's, like it or not, that is a psychological level. Okay? Testing that area, it's expected to act as somewhat of a psychological area of resistance. Okay? That 18.25, let me lay out the levels and then we'll talk about them. 18.25 has been a technical level for quite a long time. We've been discussing that on Palantir for a while now, okay? And to the upside, we have about 21.30. All right, that's of course another area to watch. So the top and bottom levels, that 21.30 region, right, never an exact penny, and 18.25, that kind of forms the channel. $20 is a psychological area that we're currently kind of trading around. So listen, if you are a bull, you're thinking a couple of things. First of all, just hold 18.25 if we end up seeing a back test of that. Next up, ideally, break above and hold 20 as a support level. Reestablish that as a support level, because that could potentially open us up, right, for a move back toward 21.30, potentially even above these recent highs of 21.85. But number one priority, just ideally claim 20. That's what's on my mind tomorrow. And if we see a backside test, just hold 18.25. All right. Now, if you're a bear, that 18.25, that 21.30 becomes your 18.25 equivalent. Do not give up 21.25, 21.30. Okay. Ideally. Really, do not give up 20. Okay. That's kind of the biggest level. You do not want Palantir showing enough strength if you are a bear or you're positioned short. You don't want this thing showing enough strength to claim that psychological level of 20 bucks a share. You want this thing rejecting as hard as possible, back down toward 18.25, and really below 18.25 is what you would want to see if you're a bear. Big volatile day, sure, but $20 a share is your enemy if you're a bear here tomorrow. Now, implied volatility here on the name, you can see that volume candle, big volume of today, of course. You see here implied volatility is creeping back to the upside. Just understand, if you own options, the higher that goes, the higher the potential risk of IV crush if we end up seeing implied volatility fade back downside, which is not uncommon after earnings events, by the way. Now, what are the option traders thinking? This is, of course, data from today, so before the earnings report hit, but still worth taking a look at. What was the sentiment as we headed into the close? Okay. 915,000 total contracts, good sample size. 569,000 of those were calls, 346,000 of those were puts. Overall call per ratio leaning to the bullish side. Short-term speculation, interestingly, a little more undecided. 164,000 calls, 146,000 puts, still leaning slightly bullish, but not quite as much as that overall ratio, okay? And of course, the reasoning for that overall ratio being a little bit more weighted to the bullish side is because we had much more calls between 61 and 100 delta. That's that mid to longer term, deeper in the money contracts compared to puts, right? We had less than 5,000 puts from 61 to 100 delta range, and we had over 35,000 calls. Listen, before you guys head out, let me know in the comment section what stock, even if it is just more Palantir, I'd like to get that reinforcement there. What stocks would you like to see me cover here in the future on the channel? That feedback helps out tremendously, and I'll see you in the next one.